Do you carry around a bunch of USB thumb drives, each with its own bootable OS? But at some point, it becomes too cumbersome, right? In this video, we will look at creating one live boot USB with Ventoy, which will enable you to have multiple bootable OSs on that one drive. Please help me out by hitting the subscribe button so you too can find the diamonds in the rough. Why would one carry around a bunch of bootable USB thumb drives? In the digital forensics and incident response world, you often need to boot a system in order to image it, or you may want to run other tools on a clean system. So having a bootable USB is very helpful. The first thing we're going to do is to download the program. We're going to download the Ventoy tool from ventoy.net. So I'm going to go ahead and type that URL into my Edge browser here. And as you can see from the website, it tells you that Ventoy is an open source tool and it creates bootable USB drives, and it can contain ISOs, Windows images, IMG files, VHDX files, EFI files, etc. It supports legacy BIOS and various different kinds of UEFI formats. From the OS standpoint, it supports versions of Windows, Linux, Chrome, VMware, etc. And it's got a ton of other features that I haven't dug into yet, but it looks pretty extensive. So let's scroll back up to the top navigation bar and then select Downloads. It then brings me to a page with 3 downloadable files. There is a Windows zip file, a Linux tar file, and then a live CD ISO. I'm going to go ahead and select the Windows zip file because I'm going to run this on a Windows machine, as most people would. And then it's going to bring me to the GitHub download page. I'm going to go ahead and click on the Windows zip file again. And I'm also going to click on the Linux tar file to download that because I'm going to play with that as well. And then lastly, I'm also going to click on the SHA-256.txt file, so I know what the hashes are for the files. Now I'm going to go to my file browser, to the downloads folder, and then verify my download by hashing the downloaded file and then comparing that hash to the expected hash in the text file. I'm going to go ahead and open the SHA-256.txt file, place it down here on my screen. Then I'm going to launch the quick hash tool, choosing the 64-bit version, and then dragging it off to the side. This is the same tool that I covered in a previous video on the Linux side, but it's the same tool. I'm going to go ahead and select the SHA-256 algorithm, and then go ahead and drag the Ventoy's windows.zip file into the quick hash window. And here we see the calculated hash starts with 8D54AA. And if we look at the text file, that's the same hash. So I'm satisfied that the download was valid. All right, now I'm going to right click on the ventoy.zip file in the file browser. And then from the menu, I'm going to select extract all. And then I'm going to extract it back to the same location in my downloads folder. Once that's done, go ahead and click into the Ventoy folder and then double click on the executable file named Ventoy to disk.exe. So the program is pretty simple. It asks you to choose a device. That would be your multi-boot USB. And in this case, my dropdown is empty because I don't have a USB plugged in. So let me go ahead and plug in a wiped USB and then hit the refresh symbol. And in my case, my USB is a 64 gig SanDisk Ultra. So let's go ahead and select that. Next, you see that in this area here, it shows you the version of Ventoy you're running and whether you want to enable secure boot or not, and then the partitioning scheme. In my case, secure boot support is enabled and I'm using the MBR partitioning scheme. So let's go ahead and click on the option menu up here in the top to make any changes. The first item that is already checked is the secure boot support. You can click on it to disable support. You can see that the locked icon below is removed. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it back on, as most machines these days come with secure boot enabled. Next is the partition style, and you can select either MBR or GPT. I'm going to leave it as MBR, but feel free to select GPT if you don't care for legacy support. Partition configuration will allow you to preserve space at the end of the disk or align partitions with 4K block sizes. Go ahead and see the Ventoy documentation and how to use these special options. Next is the clear Ventoy. This will remove the special stuff that Ventoy puts on your USB device to make it work. And you can tell if a device is Ventoy formatted by looking at this location here on the application. It gives you the version number of Ventoy if it's already on there. Otherwise, it's blank. Next one here is show all devices, and it's off by default. And when it's off, it will only show you devices connected via the USB interface. And if you toggle this show all devices, it will now show USB devices, any hard drives, SSDs, NVMEs, SD cards, etc. Basically any devices that's connected to your system. And this will also show your C: drive right on Windows. So if you're running Windows, be very careful and don't overwrite your OS drive. Generate VTSI file is the next menu item. And tools like Rufus can read these VTSI, which is the Ventoy Sparse Image format. Rufus can read these files and then write it to a failed install of Ventoy to complete the installation. And I haven't run into this situation yet, so I haven't had an opportunity to use this. And the last menu item is non-destructive install, which is useful if you already have a non-Ventoy USB that has a bunch of data and you don't want to lose that data. If your USB is already Ventoy enabled, then the menu item will be grayed out. So basically what the non-destructive install does is that it will shrink the first or only partition on that destination drive and then add the VTOY EFI partition to the disk, and that's how it's able to preserve your data. There are a bunch of requirements like the partition being shrunk needs to be NTFS formatted or one of the ext file systems, and then there must be free space in that first partition. And then the first partition must be aligned to the 1 meg starting location, etc. If you click on the languages menu, you will be presented with all the languages that this program supports. I'm not too worldly and can only read English, so I will leave it as such. Finally, when you are ready, just click the install button. You'll be asked to make sure that you selected the right device to be formatted, because Ventoy will go ahead and reformat everything and your data will be lost. So make sure you back up anything you don't want to lose. You will be asked a second time, so I highly suggest that you look at the drive letter, the size of the device, and then the name of the USB, and hopefully one or all of those items will give you a clue as to whether you have selected the right device or not. Once you are sure, it will go ahead and format the USB. It only takes a matter of seconds, so very quick doing whatever it's doing. And when it's done, you can see in this area that it gives you the version of Ventoy now on that drive, and whether it's secure boot supported, and then the partition type. And so everything looks good on my example. So what did Ventoy actually do when it formatted the USB thumb drive? If we use disk management to look at our devices, we can see that basically Ventoy created 2 partitions. The first one is the size of almost the entire USB drive, and it's formatted with exFAT and given the volume name of Ventoy. And then it created a second partition of 32 megs, making it a FAT EFI system partition, and then named it VTOY EFI. So all the magic of how Ventoy works is in that small 32 meg partition. And then all the ISOs that you want to boot are copied into the larger partition. So that's why when you do an update, all it is doing is that it's updating that small VTOY EFI partition. The last thing you need to do before being able to use your newly formatted Ventoy drive is to load it up with ISOs. This part is as simple as just dragging and dropping files from one folder to another, And so in your Windows file browser, go to the device named Ventoy. It's going to have a drive letter of whatever you just formatted. So for me is E:. In another file browser, go to the folder that contains the ISOs of interest, and then just drag the files over. When it's done copying, you can then eject that USB and start using it as your bootable drive. Now let's test out our Ventoy USB drive. I'm going to plug it into my Dell laptop, and then I'm going to power it on, and I'm going to hold down the F12 key so that I can select the boot device. F12 is the key for Dells, but it may be different on your system. On an HP, it is usually the escape key. On a Lenovo, it could be F12, F11, or F8. On a Sony, it's usually F10 or F11. On a Toshiba, it's usually F12. So either consult your documentation or look on the screen real quick and it should tell you. In my case, I see that my legacy boot options are here, and I have the internal M2 SATA SSD as an option, onboard NIC as an option, or the USB storage device. I'm going to go ahead and select the USB storage device, and Ventoy is going to load up with its boot menu. And here I can see the options to boot are basically all of the ISOs that I dragged onto that partition earlier. I'm going to go ahead and select Kane 12, and we see that the graphics are initially screwed up, but have a little bit of patience and the boot process will actually complete, and we will get to the Kane 12 distro. So I tested this out on a couple of different versions of Kane, of Parrot OS, of Kali, Paladin, Fedora, and they all work fine on my Dell Precision 3510, but then I had some failures when I tried it out on a Dell XPS. So I believe that this is probably hardware dependent. So there may be some BIOS tweaks I need to do on either the machine or on the Ventoy drive itself. Ventoy seems to get updated pretty frequently on an almost monthly basis, if not more frequent. And if you want to update your Ventoy enable USB to a newer version, you don't have to lose the ISOs that you've already put on that drive. All you need to do is run the latest version of Ventoy and then click the update button on the bottom, and then the VTOY-EFI partition is the one that gets updated and leaves the larger partition containing the ISOs alone. So Ventoy is another tool available to create multi-boot USB sticks. It's free, it's open source, and relatively easy to use. There are a ton of customizable features that I haven't explored. One of the limitations is that Mac hardware is not supported. I tried to boot my Ventoy USB on my MacBook Pro, and it got to the boot menu page but couldn't get further. The other limitation is that because Ventoy uses ISOs, you can't make the bootable OSs persistent. And that's a feature that I find very useful in my world in digital forensics and incident response. But I guess you can make your own partition and then store your own scripts and data in that self-made partition. For more videos on the Kane distro, see these videos here. For more videos on the Linux command line, make sure you watch these videos here. Make sure you click on the blue monkey to subscribe. Thanks for your time and happy hunting.